So I've got a sausage joke for you. Never mind, it's the worst. Everybody needs a good sausage joke. I asked around, nobody had one. That's what I came up with. Hey guys, I'm Brandon Rahe. Welcome to this week's episode of the Go Headquarters podcast. We're on a roll with these things, see if we can keep this ball rolling. So today what I want to bring to you is the conversation and topic of you are what you repeatedly do, you are not what you do occasionally. And this is something that I talk to all of you guys about all the time. We typically get comments and questions like, hey, what about bread? Or what's the best exercise I should do? Or hey, what's the one thing that is going to matter the most for weight loss? Or what's the one thing that I can do better? And my answer to that is almost always zoom out. So in the line of thinking that those questions are on, we're very zoomed in, right? On one little specific thing. It's one item, one food item, one exercise, one habit. Now, there's a lot of validity to that, of course. We can improve one thing, and on a long enough timeline, maybe that adds up. However, I don't like when people zoom in when there are maybe 100 topics that we could and should address. So what I usually encourage is to zoom out and start looking at the big picture and start looking at the frequency and like kind of regularity of those things, whatever it is. So let's kind of pick some examples and to go over. So two main categories that we get into in my capacity, right? Exercise and nutrition. So on an exercise side, maybe it's, hey, how many miles a week should I run? Well, that's an interesting question because how much running do you already do? And so if we're answering, hey, 10 miles a week, well, maybe that's less than you're already running. Maybe it's double what you're already running. So how do I really answer that? I mean, I could definitely get into that one individual's life and talk about their running, but I'm also going to zoom out again and not just talk about running, because maybe running is there in abundance. Maybe we've got plenty of running and what we're really missing is some stretching. Maybe we're missing some weightlifting, right? So if we're beating ourselves to death on running, we don't necessarily want to just add more running, right? We need to look at all things. So I never want my athletes to be a specialist unless they're in a competitive environment and they need to specialize. I want my athletes to be jacks of all trades. I want you to be able to lift and lift heavy. I want you to have good aerobic capacity to run, swim, bike, whatever. I want you to be flexible and mobile enough to go through pain-free ranges of motion in all your body parts, not just your whatever, not just your ankles. I want you to be able to squat and get overhead. I want you to be able to do back bends and everything, right? So again, what's in abundance and what's lacking? So if all you're doing is running, I'm maybe going to want you to deload running and add more strength training because that may help fix your gait and cure some of your ailments that your running frequency is adding up to. So again, my answer to the question of like how much should I do or what's the best thing is going to be zoom out, look at the big picture. Let's try to bring it into balance where it's more restorative and healthy. So that's kind of my exercise example. Now that's a little vague as it's meant to be. So on the nutrition side, same thing, right? Always people are asking about what food is good, what's bad, what should they eat after midnight, what should they eat right after a workout, blah, 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 blah. And that one specific item that they're listing is probably 1% of the problem or the solution. So again, what's lacking and what's in abundance in their nutrition? So to do that, to answer that question, we've got to zoom out and look at everything they eat through the course of a week or through the course of a month or through the course of a decade, right? So a lot of people will come in and they'll say, oh, I ate a salad yesterday. Okay, is that supposed to help me decide that you're on track or not on track? Because if you ate a salad for lunch and you ate a double bacon cheeseburger with a large shake and Biggie fry for dinner, that salad doesn't mean a whole lot to me at this point. But without the big picture, I don't really know that. So, you know, hey, is bread bad for you? Well, let's look at it. What's your carbohydrate intake compared to your protein intake and your fat intake? And of all of that, what does that yield in total calories? That's going to kind of determine if our weight is going up or down in terms of body weight. And then out of that weight management and energy management, what percentages are coming from carbohydrates and proteins and fats? Well, if you've got a really good favorable ratio and your carbohydrates are not in abundance and your carbs, proteins, and fats are in pretty good balance, well then a slice of toast one day a week on Sundays for a lazy breakfast isn't really going to be a topic of conversation. I'm not going to zero in on that change. Now, if we're eating bagels for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, we're eating garlic bread for dinner with our spaghetti, and we've got carbs on carbs on carbs, and there's hardly any protein to be found, and there's hardly any healthy fat to be found, and then we add wine on top of that, more carbohydrate. Well, now we've got an issue. In this case, we've got an abundance of carbohydrates, and we're lacking these other things. We clearly have an issue. Now bread is a major topic of conversation, and we need to scale that way down and start adding some other things. But again, just asking the question, is bread bad, is far too specific and far too vague to clearly answer. So, and I would answer that with almost any question regarding exercise or regarding nutrition. Now, I guess I want to cover one more topic in terms of exercise. And this is something I bring up in almost every podcast somehow, regardless of what the topic is, and that's okay, is what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths? So earlier talking about exercise, I mentioned what's in abundance and what is lacking. Now, that's maybe what you are currently doing. But also, we can look at that in terms of strengths and weaknesses. So if I'm really good at weightlifting, but I'm terrible at running, I am probably biased towards training myself to lift weights because I'm good at it. I maybe enjoy it more because I'm good at it. It's more rewarding, right? I don't like the fact that I suck at running and that it's hard for me, blah, blah, blah. You get where I'm going with this. So running is my weakness. So maybe I need more running in my life. Not that it's lacking, right? Maybe I do some of it, but maybe I need to bias my ratios to try to improve on that. And I maybe need to target my goal setting mentality, right? This is why I'm asking the question in the first place anyway, right? Is, hey, what am I'm trying to achieve weight loss, so is bread bad? Or I'm trying to get more fit, so is running good, or is more running good? Well, I maybe need to bias my answer to target some of my weaknesses sometimes, because in most cases, your weakness or weaknesses are going to be your limiting factors. Limiting factors for what? Well, whatever your goals are, right? If I'm trying to get more fit and lose weight at the same time, but I hate running, running's a weakness of mine, well, you better be pretty certain that running is going to help you, A, get more fit, B, as a result, you're going to lose some weight and start reaching our goals. But we've got to kind of go through the suck and get to the running protocols. Easier said than done. So anyway, if you're ever going to ask your coach or yourself, or you're going to Google a question regarding exercise or nutrition, before you dive too much into that research and have those conversations, and they're great conversations to have, so I am encouraging you to bring these topics up. But don't be surprised when you don't get a crystal clear answer, because for me, I'm probably going to say, well, what else is going on? Let's zoom out and look at the big picture. Look at what's going on all around. So again, you are what you repeatedly do. You are not what you do occasionally. So that's going to come down to just frequency. How many times have you behaved that way over the last decade? If you haven't run in the last decade, you're probably not going to be great at running, and it's not going to be comfortable. If you've eaten nothing but bread and drinking wine in the last decade, you're probably going to look like you eat bread and drink wine and eat in abundance, right? So people that are extremely fit and have really awesome physiques, it's probably because they behave like a fitness person. They lift, they run, they whatever, and they eat a certain way to justify that physique, and they've been doing that for a long time. They didn't do it for 6 weeks. They didn't do it for, whatever, spring break, and then all of a sudden had a miraculous turnaround. They've had to repeat that behavior on a really long time. So you are what you repeatedly do. You would not go to work for 5 hours a week and expect a 40-hour per week paycheck. However, in exercise and in nutrition, that's exactly what people expect. They expect to eat one salad, whatever that means, and they expect to lose 5 pounds a week because they incorporated one salad into their shit show of nutrition. Sorry folks, don't mean to burst your bubble, but that is not how that works. Been doing this a while and haven't seen that be successful for anyone thus far. So that's it. Think about that. You are what you repeatedly do, not what you do occasionally. So take that with you this week into training and into your lifestyle. Those little changes do add up on a long enough timeline if you do them repeatedly. Stay tuned for next week. We'll catch you then.